Welcome to the Wing Academy videocast, an extension of Wing Academy of Unfoldment. I'm your host, Diane Wing, and my show focuses on how to use spiritual concepts in the real world. We'll address issues related to the mind, body, and spirit, discover how to release what holds us back, and ways to come into our power. Learn more at dianewing.com. Please like and subscribe. Click the bell to be notified of new episodes. Today, my special guest is Neil Bryson, corporate executive turned conscious leader, speaker, and author of the powerful new book, Sunrise Warrior: Timeless Wisdom on Transformational Leadership. Neil is here to share his journey, his insights, and what it truly means to lead from the inside out. You can connect with him on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Sunrise Warrior Path. Welcome, Neil.
Thanks, Diane. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited about this because there are lots of business books on the market, but this one has a unique perspective on the type of leadership modern business needs. To gain the insights you shared in this book, you made some very bold decisions. Can you tell us about those?
Well, I think when I began this journey, I had hit a wall in my life and I had hit it hard, right? Um, I had attained everything I wanted to from a success standpoint. I had a successful career, decent income, perfect family, perfect dog, all of those things that you seek. But in the inside, on the inside, I was just never satisfied. I was kind of falling apart, always anxious, burned out, constantly wondering, is this really it? I felt like I was sleepwalking through life. I had all the success that you could hope for, but I could never experience true joy or fulfillment or sustain happiness for me personally. So I'd been in therapy for years, like decades, and I had wonderful therapists, and they kept me functioning and upright, right? They kept me moving through life, but something just never quite clicked for me. And when I hit that wall, I eventually realized like I just couldn't keep living like that. Um, so I made a pretty bold decision, as you just alluded to, where I left my job. I just quit, and I took a leap into the unknown, and I went on a journey of self-discovery. Um, that included a 4-day ayahuasca retreat in Costa Rica, which was both wild, which we can talk about, and profoundly healing for me. But that's when things started to shift. I realized what I had been missing. I reconnected with something much deeper. Call it purpose, soul, the divine source, whatever word you want to put in there, right? But I realized, you know what? There's a lot of people out there like how I was feeling, and how I was, that were just quietly struggling, silently suffering, chasing success but feeling disconnected. And I wanted to write the book to kind of share my experience with them and show them that there's another way, there's another path to feeling connected. You can have success, but you can also feel happiness and joy at the same time.
Yeah, it's hard in a corporate environment because you're trying to create somebody else's vision. A lot of
Yeah.
times it's not about your own vision, and there's a lot of times it's a toxic environment where everybody's trying to step on the other person to succeed. And um, I think that you're part of the burnout that you experienced had to do with that. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think, you know, serving everyone else's purpose versus your own absolutely drove my burnout. And that sheer competitiveness where you just felt like you couldn't trust anybody. So while you were trying to build relationships, or I was trying to build relationships, I never felt authentically connected to people, right? And you're almost trained that way in corporate America to be that kind of leader. Like you have to disassociate and be separate from the emotions of the job. Otherwise, you're considered weak. But I think, when you do that, you kind of separate from yourself as well. And that's how I was feeling isolated. That's why I was feeling anxious. And that's again to the point of being disconnected. It's encouraged in corporate America to disconnect, and that's where all of that was being driven internally for me, because you're getting a mixed message from what success is supposed to be versus what you feel like it should be inside yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you know yourself, if you know yourself only in that environment,
Yeah.
it's all about everybody else's perspective of who you are. And it's not your own perspective. It's not really clear about, okay, well, if I didn't have all this other stuff going on, would I be this way? Would it be this way? Would I be feeling like this? And so the ayahuasca ritual in Costa Rica, which isn't for everyone,
No.
just
No. And I don't
but
recommend it for everyone. You don't have to use. I want to be very clear. Plant medicine was important for me personally on my journey because I needed to break through a lot of trauma and walls that um, other ways of doing that just weren't working for me. Obviously, I said I was in therapy. I've practiced yoga. I have done deep breathing. I have done all of those things, but it was something I needed. But and I say in the book 3 or 4 times, like, hey, I'm not advocating this for anybody. You need to do very deep research on this personally to make sure it's the right fit for you. But
yeah,
there's other
just
ways to
as
do
you
it.
did.
Yeah.
You did a
I mean,
lot of research before you went. Um,
yeah, like three
but
years. Yeah.
okay, yeah, 3 years, that's a long time to
Yeah.
be sure. But it really, in your case, felt like the right choice because you had some obstacles to deeper understanding. Things were standing in your way. It was like there was a wall, like you were
Mhm.
saying. It had to break open, and you wanted something very um, extreme at that point to blast through. Um, so when at what point do you feel like the wall came down? What happened when it did? How did that feel?
Well, I went through 4 ceremonies, which is a lot, just to be honest. Most people who do ayahuasca will do one and say, wow, that was amazing. I did 4, not quite consecutive, but 4 almost consecutive ceremonies. And I think the real breakthrough came in night one, um, because I really had to experience an ego death, um, and a separation from the person that I was versus the person who I wanted to be.
Right.
So I needed to go through a lot of healing in that ceremony to hear old wounds, past traumas, all the things that look, shape who we are, right, as individuals and human beings, but didn't serve me anymore and were kind of holding me back. So that you know facing or watching my ego die, facing some of my deepest fears that I never thought I would have to actually facing things, I should say, that I thought I had already dealt with, you know, um, truly. But what I realized is I had just suppressed them. I just pushed them down and compartmentalized them to a point where I felt I had them under control. And what I realized is we never really have that stuff under control. You really have to face it and understand it and deal with it. And I needed to experience forgiveness, and I needed to hear that from a source and a power and an energy, you know, more perfect than anything I've ever experienced in my life. So it didn't matter how many times a therapist or people who love me said, "Oh, you're not that person. You're not for you're forgiven," and all this. And I don't know. There's just something about it that, especially type A people, um, high functioning people usually use that stuff as fuel, right? To drive them, that imperfection, that you're seeking perfection all the time, but never quite grasping it, and then using that to push yourself even harder and further. Um, there's a point where, you know, you just can't go any farther. And that's where I hit the wall. You just, I mean, you can make more money, but then you're starting to really grapple with, well, what's my purpose? Like, money's not
Right.
purpose, right? Money's
Right.
freedom, right? But, I got caught up in that greed in that corporate world, and it just was a deep, empty hole for me. So,
Well, there was also the lack of that spiritual connection.
yes.
And so that creates an emptiness also.
Yeah. When you sit there and think that, like, is this physical world it? You start to live your life very differently than if knowing there's something more, right? And I think going through those ceremonies helped me realize that spiritual connection is real. Because I talk about in the book, I kind of lost my faith in a lot of that early on in my life, for multiple different reasons. But yes, regaining that spiritual connection, knowing that you're never truly alone, right? That you're always supported, just gives you a much healthier view on life.
Yes. Yes. And with this very personal experience, because a lot of business books aren't as personal as this one is, um, what led you to share it, and what do you hope people get from it?
It's funny, like, I had mixed reviews from beta readers. Some were like, "Oh my God, you're sharing too much," and others were like, "Oh my God, you didn't go deep enough." And I felt the vulnerability, sorry, was really important to connect with the reader to make it more authentic. Because I just felt like I wanted to write a book that was different than all the other business books out there. They're really People will tell their backstory, but it's always from a business and a professional standpoint,
Yeah.
you know. And I feel like I don't want to. I think it's just cliche and overdone. It's just like, okay, everybody struggled in business, and then you got that, you know, one moment when you were given an opportunity and you took it, and blah blah blah. And I was like, that's fine. But no one was. I hadn't really read any books where someone really got vulnerable and said, here's what I was personally dealing with, um, as I was attaining all the success that I was getting and hitting the accelerator on wealth and promotions and everything like that. And I just felt like that that was more meaningful for me to connect with the reader on, so that they would really understand the message and hone in on the purpose of the book, you know.
Yes. One uh, review that I got verbally from someone who is reading your book right now, she said that she's an executive assistant. She wants her boss to read this book. But what she said was it struck her that the assistants also were going through such a hard time along with their senior leader. If they're supporting a senior leader, they're feeling it too.
That's really interesting.
It
Yeah.
is.
I
It
didn't
is.
really I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah. And so as you're revolutionizing the way leadership is viewed in this book. And there are so many lists and tools and definitions and things that people can really benefit from in here. But I thought that that comment really expanded who could benefit from this book.
I That really resonates with me, because I think, when I reflect on that, your family and the people closest to you actually go through it with you. And I think that translates to even some of your closest coworkers, which could be your executive assistant or second in command or whatever, where they're going to feel the energy that you're giving off, right? I mean, it's just that's how it all connection and interconnectedness kind of works, is we feed off each other's energy. So that makes a lot of sense to me because, you know, I didn't talk about it a lot, but my family went through this journey with me, and and it was hard on them, as much as it was hard on me, as I was trying to figure out what's my purpose in this life.
Right.
So that makes a lot of sense that the people close to you at work could be feeling that as well.
Yeah. And that she saw too that it was possible to have a positive experience with a transformational type leader. It doesn't have to be all burnout and stress and, difficulty. It can really be uplifting and connecting and all those types of things, because in this book you're redefining success and what it would look like in a corporate environment.
Yeah, it's very non-traditional. I can tell you that. And I mean, um, look, I mean, when you start talking about leading with your heart, serving down, humility, more sense of purpose than just numbers on a spreadsheet. Like, what are you actually trying to accomplish? Is there a greater, purpose of supporting humanity, or, something else that, other than just delivering financial results to the board or to Wall Street or whatever, it just changes the whole mindset of everyone in the orbit of that person. But look, that takes a lot of courage, because you're still dealing with very traditional kind of leadership schemes that are out
Yes.
there right now. And I think it's which have worked in the past. I don't want to take anything away from it. I mean, you can get success that way, but how do you feel about it? Can you go home and sleep at night? You know, um,
Right.
are you really building up the people around you to become the next generation of leaders that your organization needs? That's something I've always tried to do. I think I was doing it superficially, because I was kind of taught to do it, and or I taught myself to do it, I guess, because I saw results that way. I didn't feel it, but I knew if I made my partners and coworkers around me feel special, that they would have some type of connection to me and then execute on the plan that I needed them to execute on. So I always thought it was like a means to an end. Now it's really, to me, investing more in those people is more important than executing on the plan. The plan will happen. The plan's the plan. I think that's where people um, get really caught up in making sure that you execute the plan. It's like, well, one of my favorite quotes is from Mike Tyson. He's like, everybody has a plan. Do you get punched in the mouth? Right. And I mean, I don't know another, I don't know a time in business when I didn't get punched in the mouth. I mean, you can put a plan together, and things are changing, which is great now, because we used to put 5-year plans together, and you're like, why do we do that? Because at the end of year one, it's like next 4 years, it looks completely different because you have new
Right.
information.
Yeah.
So, if you focus more on the people and not the plan, everything else will take care of itself, right? Because,
Yeah.
you're hiring really experienced, talented people, at least if you're a good leader, right? I mean, and let them do their jobs, but they can't they're not going to do their jobs. And now it's more important than ever, especially in a virtual environment like we're in, where you're not stopping by people's offices all the time. And you're not going out and having lunch or grabbing a drink afterwards just to talk about things, or just seeking advice in that one-to-one kind of human connection. It's all on video. And we're so, wired now to just get everything accomplished we need to in the time we're on, and then click off and walk away. You lose that whole connection piece that actually is the real motivator of what people do in business.
Right.
I think of all the success I've had is because someone actually believed in me and motivated me and gave me a chance and an opportunity, and took me under their wing. That's really hard to do in a video environment, so all of
Mm.
that stuff is super important, for success nowadays. And but it all starts with you doing the inner work and understanding kind of who you are and what your purpose is. What's driving you. And is it, are you serving a higher purpose? Are you serving the highest good? Or are you just serving to get rich? you
Right.
know
Well, it's also about connectivity works both ways. So if the executive is empowering the people, that's great. Are the people responding to that and feeling safe enough and comfortable to
Mhm.
do what they need to do to empower themselves?
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
part of it. I mean, you compare corporate um, corporate environments to how it could be with tribal
Mhm.
communities
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
And that is very different. You want to talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten some really good feedback on that because it's kind of getting back to the roots of community, and leaning on each other. In the book, I talk a lot about a lot of concepts, how indigenous tribes kind of manage their community and communal success, and how we've kind of gotten away from that, and it's all about the individual, which is, you know, there's many reasons how we got here, which we won't waste time on that. But focusing on yourself, excluding everyone else around you, limits your ability to impact other people, but also even may limit your personal success for a lot of people because you're in isolation. So I think the overarching theme of the tribal sections that I talk about is that, leaning on each other, working together, opening yourself up to other perspectives, right? Not always thinking your way is the right way, listening more than talking, you know, um, respecting tradition, um, but having the willingness to, transform and try new things, when given the opportunity or when presented with new information. All of that stuff is super important for future success, I think, especially in a world that's just completely connected all the time now. I mean, information is hitting us and data is hitting us so fast. It's you need to be able to pivot. You need to, at least my experience is, you need to be able to look at those opportunities when they present themselves, and take quick and fast action on that, to kind of, ride that wave of success, if you will. But that only happens when there's a shared consciousness of everything going on, right? And because, especially now, again, I'll go back to it. I work out of my home now, and I miss that community, if you will, of an office where you could go in and brainstorm on an idea, or, see an opportunity and kind of, flesh that out to create something new or something exciting for your business. All of that is so important now, especially again with the interconnectedness of the world, and how fast information is flowing right now. So yeah, it's like going back to the past to kind of succeed in the future. That was one of the biggest revelations I had. Especially experiencing, some very tribal type ceremonies when I was in Costa Rica.
Yeah. Yeah. And the people that were in the ceremony with you were also experiencing their energy. And that's not so different from when you're working with a group. The energies are flowing between you for good, bad, or indifferent. you
Yeah.
know, you want it to be supportive. You want it to raise the energy of one another, because if people don't feel valued, then they're not going to participate, and they're not going to contribute to their highest level.
Right. Yeah, in the ceremonies, I mean, I was in ceremonies with people I'd never met before, from all over the world. Some of them spoke different languages, and um, through the use of that plant medicine, we were able to connect our consciousness at a different level. It's not exactly the same as a working environment. There's it was very different. But you're right. There's similarities because you're feeling each other's energy. You're feeding off each other's energy. In the ceremonies that I experienced, it would go from darkness to light. You know, um, uh, and oscillate in between both of them throughout the entire 3 or 4 hour experience. And sometimes it was changing so fast it was exhausting. And I talk about that. But that's not dissimilar to what you're right, to what goes on in a working environment. You go in highs and lows all the time, right? You feel like you're best friends and then you're at odds with people, so there is a lot of similarities to how that energetic flow works in the corporate environment and too. And I think you have to respect that. And you have to be in touch with that, because driving that to its higher purpose, to a positive outcome, and getting everybody's energy to vibrate at a higher level is going to produce something that you never would have imagined. So,
Yes. Yes. Okay, so we only have a few minutes left,
oh,
but I'd like to leave the audience with a tip that you can share to get started on their own path of change, either in business or in their own lives.
yeah, when I think about a tip to kind of embrace change, what did it for me is when I started to open myself up, to embrace the unknown, right? Step into that fear, because fear of change is worse than the change itself, right? So, um, my tip would be, you know, summon that inner courage, embrace that unknown, and to me, awaken that warrior within yourself to go out and start the change process. That took me a long time. I kept wanting to stay in my comfort zone,
Mm,
and
yes,
stay, with what was already I was experiencing, because it was known, and it was working. But I think everything has a point of diminishing returns, and if you're not continually moving forward on your path, then you're standing still and you're stagnating. So,
yes,
um, you know, finding a way to summon that courage. I did it a different way. But, whether it's connecting with nature, or it's, just meditation, or more physical kind of exercise, whatever it is for you, pushing forward and trying something new to embrace that unknown is the first step to change, and putting you on the path to a higher purpose.
awesome. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, because change is scary.
It is scary. It is scary, but it's also transformational, right?
Yes,
So, I
yes,
mean, um, I've always thought fear is not meant to stop us. It's really much more of a transformational guide. It's certainly there to raise caution, and that's very instinctual, I think, for us, right? Because that goes back,
yeah,
eons of time, because there was a moment where there were tigers in the jungle, and they could they could jump out at us and everything. That doesn't happen anymore. So,
right.
but I feel like that fear that we have right now is just, um, a transformational guide and companion to actually just warn you to pause, because you are going to experience something transformational, and just prepare and be ready for it, but to step through it, you know. So,
Yes,
yeah,
yes. Be open to that change, because if you're limiting yourself, it's never going to happen.
yeah,
Not going to happen. So, guys, I highly recommend this book, Sunrise Warrior, and it's on Amazon, and you can get it has all 5-star reviews. You can read the experiences of the people who have read it so far, and it's the perfect size to read it either in one sitting or as you're flying from here to there, um,
That's
to
why
the
I wrote
next
it. That's
meeting.
it. That's it.
That's
As
it.
a corporate executive, you could but in one plane ride and then back. You can be done with it and review reflecting on the book. That's the way I like to read. So that's what I wrote. Yeah.
That's it. And there are so many great tips in here that are actionable. So this isn't just another, yeah, okay, business book, whatever. It's an actionable, uplifting, very personal experience that you can embrace within yourself. So Neil, thank you so much for being here and good luck with the book.
Thank you, Diane. It was a pleasure being here. I always love speaking with you. So thank you for having me on the podcast too.
You're
Appreciate it.
welcome. Take care.
Bye.